So I was having a conversation the other day with someone who I was recently new to meeting, and she was like an acquaintance. And we were talking, and she was basically asking me some questions, and she started saying things like, I don't eat any fried food, and I try to eat relatively healthy and relatively clean, as if I'm supposed to know what that means. Because her clean and her healthy could be totally different than what someone else is deeming clean and healthy. And so I started to, have a conversation with her and break things down, and I started to realize that a lot of people get burnt out and feel really frustrated because they're focusing on what they think is going to give them results instead of what is actually going to be a key contributing factor to the transformation of their physique. So in today's video, I have the handy dandy whiteboard here to show you exactly what matters and how much of it matters towards actually transforming your physique. So I have pie charts here, and I'm going to kind of tell you everything that goes into these little spots here so that you know what you should focus on when it comes to actually transforming your physique, and you don't waste your time focusing on things that don't actually make a difference when it comes to fat loss and muscle growth. Okay, so we're gonna go over to these three different categories here: food, the gym, and other. And I'm going to tell you the main things that you should focus on. So if you're currently doing something that is not in one of these categories here, quit fucking doing it right after this video. And if maybe you're not focusing enough on some of the things that are bigger pieces of the pie, do more of those things, get better at it, watch some of my other videos on how to actually implement the things that I'm going to be discussing here. Now, something that I want to tell you before we get into discussing all the pies here, I want you to imagine them as almost puzzles. If you are missing one piece, it's going to affect your results, right? So if you do 75% of this pie, you're going to get 75% of the results. And so ideally, you would want to be doing what is here to be getting the best result possible, not just bits and pieces. And so when you can get all of these pieces down to a T, you can then get the best results possible. So once you do everything that I'm about to list on this chart, that's when you can start getting into the things that are like 5% or 10% and like the nitty gritty details that you would optimize to get better results. But if you are not seeing visible changes in the mirror, you're not losing fat, you're not building muscle, you keep staying at the same weight or you keep losing the same 5 pounds and you're not actually seeing any progress, you don't need to be focusing on the little things to optimize. Right now, you need to be focusing on these big main drivers here instead of trying to focus on things that only make a difference when these things are taken care of. Okay, so we're going to start off with a category that I get the most questions about, and that is food. Now, a lot of people make plenty of mistakes with food just because food is a tough subject because most people have a poor relationship with it. So when we take the poor relationship out of the equation and we look at food objectively for the purposes that it serves for us with the goal of fat loss and muscle growth in mind, this is what you need to look at. Now, this big chunk of the puzzle here, this is going to be 50% of importance when it comes to actually seeing visible results when it comes to fat loss and muscle growth, right? So having a lean and toned physique. And that is obviously, now you can probably guess this, your total caloric intake. This is going to be the most important thing necessary to, yes, stimulate weight loss, but here on this channel, we don't really give a damn about weight loss. We want fat loss to occur. So a calorie deficit is required to either have weight loss occur or to have fat loss occur. So we want to put 50% of our energy or our focus onto our total caloric intake. Now, what most people typically do is confuse this with meaning they need to eat less food. You aren't necessarily eating less food. You are eating less calories. So the name of the game with this is eating less calories, so maintaining a caloric deficit, but filling that deficit with as much food as you possibly can. Now, the next biggest piece of the puzzle when it comes to food, this is going to be 25% right over here, and this is going to be your macronutrients. So macronutrients are essentially the nutrients that make up the foods that you eat. So in order to make sure that we're having weight loss or fat loss occur, we need to be in the caloric deficit. The next most important thing after that is making sure that you have the right macronutrient ratios. So now we want to hit our protein goal so we can retain as much muscle as possible to ensure that when we are in this caloric deficit, we are losing fat. If we have the caloric deficit without prioritizing the protein, it'll be straight up weight loss. And we don't like straight up weight loss because you're just going to be a smaller version of what you already are. Ideally, you want the composition of your body to change so you can be lean, toned, and you can have that athletic looking physique. If you do not prioritize protein, you will just be a smaller version of what you are. If we do prioritize protein, your body will slowly start to change its composition by increasing its muscle mass but decreasing the fat mass, leading for you to have the athletic toned look. Now, protein is also good because it helps keep you full. It's one of the most satiating macronutrients. And remember how I said what you want to do with your calorie deficit is fill it with as much filling food as possible to keep you full, but still keep you in a caloric deficit. Protein is going to be your best friend when it comes to that. Now, the next two macronutrients are going to be carbs and fats. I want you to think of carbs and fats as almost indirect drivers of muscle growth. Are they going to directly build and repair the muscle? No, but they're going to give you the energy necessary to provide the proper stimulus to be able to go and build muscle, right? So you're going to eat carbs and fats, and that'll give you the drive or the push to go to the gym and lift some heavy shit, and then that's what's going to actually stimulate the muscle growth. So when you prioritize your protein goal, that's going to take a chunk of your calorie deficit that you're in. The rest of the calories that are left over that's not taken up by protein, you can then fill with carbs and fats. Now, both of them are energy sources, but they react differently in the body. So carbs are going to be more quick digesting, faster energy source, whereas fats take a little bit longer to digest. But when you pair them together, it gives you a good, steady energy for the day and just for your workout. Help you avoid any crashes that you would have if you were just eating carbs, and then also help you not totally overload your body with a fat intake, because that slower digestion window can tend to make people lethargic. So pair them together and just make sure that you hit your protein goal, and then the rest of the calories that are left over within that calorie deficit, you fill it with carbs and fats. Now, there are two more key things when it comes to your food that you're going to want to pay attention to actually get visible results. Are they as important as being in a calorie deficit and hitting your macronutrient ratios? No, but they still make a difference. Now, this 15% right here is going to be your food choice. So I'm going to write food choice. Now, essentially, what I'm trying to tell you to do here is eat from whole food sources, right? It's not only better for you, but when you choose whole foods, not only are you going to feel more satiated and more full, but you'll also ensure that you're getting in your micronutrients. Next, the other 15% is food timing. Okay, so remember how I told you guys that when you're in a calorie deficit, you want to make sure that you do everything in your power possible to stay full. And you do that by making sure that you have the proper macronutrient ratios to, yes, keep you full, but also help you build and retain muscle while losing fat. Another thing that you can do is work on your food timing. Now, when it comes to your food timing, you're just basically strategically placing your meals based on your digestion, when you typically get hungry, and the things that you do in the day. So sort of planning what you eat and having those meals in accordance to your schedule. So eating around your workout, having carbs and fats before your workout, having carbs and protein post-workout, and having a little bit of protein before, all those kinds of things are strategic and help you stay full because you know your digestion window and you know what you're going to be doing in the day and when you would need that energy instead of just randomly eating. So if you are not losing fat and you are not paying attention to these 4 things here, you should start. Now, if you're not losing fat, but you feel like you are doing these things, maybe you're not paying enough attention to your caloric deficit, or maybe you're paying too much attention to your food choice and your food timing, but not enough to how much macronutrients you're hitting per day. So it could either be you're not doing one of these things, or your percentages are off and you're focusing on these 2 things and treating them like they're as important as the total caloric intake when they're not. Brought the board a little bit closer for the gym part. When it comes to lifting, there are 3 things that you're going to want to pay attention to. Now, a lot of people think that just because they walk in the gym door, all of a sudden they're going to be building muscle, and that's just not how it works. Okay, so when it comes to the gym, the first thing that is most important is going to be coming in at 50% of your focus is intensity. Now, let me tell you a story about how I failed miserably at this. Now, I showed up to the gym for a good amount of months, picking up the same damn weight. And I remember so vividly, I would come in and I would grab a 30-pound easy curl bar and I would just do 3 reps of 10. And then I would call it a day, right? And I just thought, oh, well, I went in there, I did it, I went through the motions, something's gonna happen, like I showed up, right? Just because you go in the gym doors doesn't mean that all of a sudden it's gonna work out for you. You need to be training with an intensity to make your body believe that it needs to build muscle. Because when you think of it from a very logical point of view, right? Just imagine it like this. Your body doesn't know what the hell is going on. Like it doesn't have a concept. Like your muscles and everything don't have a concept of the world that we live in right now. When you go to the gym and you perform something difficult, you push yourself, it doesn't know if you are fighting for survival or if you are at the gym. So in its mind, or in your muscles' mind and the way that they work, when you go to the gym and you do that, it's like, okay, we do this X amount of times per week. We better start building muscle so we can survive and adapt and get better at this exercise. That's exactly how it works. So if you don't provide this intensity to the lifts, your muscle will have absolutely no reason to grow. It doesn't feel threatened. So that's what you need to think of when you are trying to gauge if you're training intensely, right? So this is why people say train to failure, if not close to it. And that's what I encourage my clients to do, as well as myself. Now, intensity is important when you are executing proper form. So don't just try to ego lift, but make sure that the movement itself is working as it's supposed to. And then that's when you can load extra weight. So don't just completely do a wrong movement or start compensating by sacrificing form because the weight is too heavy. Now, the next thing that's going to be important when it comes to what you do in the gym, and this is going to be 25% of your focus, this is going to be exercise selection. So when it comes to exercise selection, you want to make sure that you're choosing the things that you enjoy and the movements that you like to do, because those are the ones that realistically you're going to be consistent with and show up for, but also ones that work. Exercises that allow you to have the stability to be able to exert the intensity necessary to get that muscle growth. The more stable an exercise is, the more force you're going to be able to exert with the desired muscle groups to be able to get the weight up. When you have to focus on stabilizing yourself to then perform the movement, it gets a little bit harder. Now, if you're a beginner lifter, I'd recommend starting with your normal compound lifts to help not only get better at stabilizing yourself, but also those compound lifts help develop the body overall. Now, the last thing that should get 25% of your attention is total volume. Now, essentially what I mean by total volume is just making sure that you're going to the gym enough to be able to get the results that you're looking for. So I'd recommend anywhere from 4 to 5 days a week. Now, sometimes you can get away with 3. I would never recommend more than 6, and you definitely need more than 2. Now, when it comes to the gym, the most important thing you should be looking at is your intensity. You want to ensure that you're pushing yourself so that your body has a reason to stimulate this muscle growth. Now, the next 2 things that you need to look at are exercise selection. So make sure you choose exercises that work and that allow you the stability to be able to exert that intensity on that weight. So the less stable you are, especially as a beginner, the harder it is to be able to exert that intensity. Next is going to be total volume. Now, you want to make sure that you're hitting these muscle groups with enough frequency to be able to see the growth that you're looking for. So I'd recommend anywhere from 4 to 6 days a week, no less, no more. So the next thing when it comes to the gym is cardio. How do you know how much cardio you should do? How do you know what form of cardio you should do? When are you supposed to do this cardio? Now, cardio works hand in hand with the food that you eat or your nutrition plan to help stimulate that fat loss. Cardio is not going to help with muscle growth. It is only going to be there to help with fat loss. And if you are coached by me or if you are one of my subscribers, you also know that we use cardio to train our anterior mid-cingulate cortex, aka to train your mind to be stronger so you can always make progress on this journey. If you fail to train your brain on path of training your body, eventually you will crumble and fall back to where you started. So since we know cardio works in accordance with food to help with the fat loss, the 2 things that we need to focus on are, number 1, getting 50% of your attention is going to be your heart rate. So when it comes to your heart rate, you're going to want it to be about 80% of your maximum heart rate. 80% of your maximum heart rate is going to put your body into a state of fat burning or fat loss. Now, the next thing that you want to pay attention to when it comes to cardio is going to be time or amount of time. If you do less cardio, you're going to have to eat less food. If you do more cardio, you can still eat less food and see more results, or you can do more cardio and eat a little bit more food. Another factor that can play into the amount of cardio you need to do is how many steps you get in a day and how active you are. If you are more active, you can get away with doing less cardio. If you are less active, you need to be more intentional with this cardio that you're doing. So they kind of all go hand in hand. And since I know that these things kind of work in tandem, typically what I'll do when I'm programming this for clients is kind of analyze who they are as a person. So I'll look and I'll be like, okay, do they seem like someone who would thrive off of less food so they don't have to do cardio? Or do they seem like someone who would thrive doing more cardio and having more flexibility with food? So I really just have to look at the person, their lifestyle, what their schedule looks like to figure out how I'm going to tweak all these things to work in accordance with each other. Now that'll lead me into the other category. These are things that are not necessarily food or gym related, but things that are important on this journey. And if you do not focus on them, they will be contributing factors to your demise and ultimately your lack of results. So the first thing is going to be 50% of importance, and you've probably heard me say this a lot, mindset. Now this transformation journey that you're going through trying to lose fat and build muscle is 50% a psychological battle, 50% all this shit over here, all this training protocol over here. When you don't pay attention to your mindset, you are neglecting the reason why you are where you are. Now, if you clicked on this video, you're probably trying to dig yourself out of a hole that you have fallen into, maybe self-sabotaged your way into. And if you do not look at your mindset, you will consistently face the same problems that led for you to fall into the hole. And this is why I have noticed so many people, especially clients that come to me that feel very burnt out, I've noticed a pattern amongst them. It's because they lack in the mindset side. They're trying to lose fat and build muscle, and they're not really looking at, wait, what led me to be at this point where I'm stuck? And so they're trying to cure a symptom rather than looking at the root cause, right? So the symptom is the fact that you're looking in the mirror and you don't like your body. Maybe you have excess body fat. Maybe you're unhappy with the way that you look. That's the symptom. The root cause of that is maybe you have a poor relationship with food, and so you use food to cope because you can't handle stress. That's a very niche example, but it is still is an example. Or maybe you are not disciplined and you're weak-minded, and so whenever things get tough, you give up, you crumble under pressure, and so you're not able to get the progress or the results that you want. Those are mindset issues. And when they aren't addressed, we get burnt out because we keep having to solve the symptoms of those root causes, and those symptoms keep popping up because we're not going back to the root problem. And that's literally, like, that is what burnout is. You're doing all this work, you're putting out all these fires, but you're not getting the results. And so you feel like you're exerting all this effort, but you're not seeing anything in the mirror. And so you're like, damn, I feel frustrated, I feel stuck, and I feel burnt out. And it's because you're not looking at your weak points, at the mistakes that you're making, at why you do what you do. You're just trying to slap a Band-Aid on essentially a bullet wound. So there are essentially two things you need to look at when it comes to mindset. Breaking down maybe some limiting beliefs that you have and the negative patterns that you have due to mental weaknesses, and also building a strong one. So understanding, where do I typically fail? Where do I typically give up? Where do I typically quit? And breaking that down so that you can then rebuild and reframe on top of it to then have a stronger mind so that you are the person who has the physique. If your physique isn't where you want it to be, it's because you're not acting or being as the person who has that physique. This little 50% sliver here is just as important as this entire side of the whiteboard over here that we just discussed. And the other 50% of this is going to be sleep and hydration. Now, sleep is extremely important just for your overall health, but it also plays a huge part in affecting your hunger cues as well as your performance in the gym. So if we are lacking in sleep and we perform poorly in the gym, we're not able to then provide the proper stimulus to be able to show our body that we need muscle to grow. A lack of sleep will cause a lack of intensity in the gym, which will inhibit muscle growth. Now, when it comes to food, a lack of sleep actually directly increases the body's production of the hunger hormone ghrelin. So just because you didn't get enough sleep in the night or you didn't get restorative sleep, you're going to wake up the next day abnormally hungry, and it's going to be really hard for you to stay in that caloric deficit. And you're abnormally hungry for no reason other than you just not getting enough sleep. And you not getting enough sleep is not indicative of your body needing extra nutrients. And so you'll think you need to eat more, which is going to make you want to eat more, and then that's going to make you break your caloric deficit, which is why weight loss will then be inhibited, if not stopped altogether. Now, the same thing goes for hydration. If we are not properly hydrated, we cannot provide the stimulus or the intensity necessary to be able to push the muscle growth. And when it comes to food, hydration can also skew our hunger cues, leading us to believe that we're hungry when in reality we are thirsty. Our brain often confuses the two feelings. Now, when it comes to sleep and hydration, those two things can also affect your energy and your overall mood. And when those two things are lacking, you can have poor energy and a poor mood, which will not only affect your workouts and your food, but also your overall performance in life and your consistency and adherence to these plans that we've set forth when it comes to the gym and the food protocol. So everything that I have listed here are things that you need to focus on if you actually want to see a change in your body. And if you are not seeing a change in your body, you are either not focusing on something that I have on this board, or you're not paying enough attention to it, or you're paying attention to things that are a little bit on the smaller side and you're giving them more importance than they actually have. Once you get all of these things down here, that's when you can focus on all the niche little things and optimizing all the small little details. If you don't have the big things down, there's no point in focusing on the tiny, minute details. Those only make a difference when you've gotten all of these things in check here. If you guys have any questions about anything on here, or how I program this for my clients, or literally anything, I will leave my Instagram in the description of this video. You can message me there. I answer all of my DMs. I'll get back to you with a voice message. If you want me to walk you through this and program this for you here so you can build your dream physique, I will leave the application to my coaching in the description of this video. If you're a good fit and spots are available, I will personally be reaching out to you. Again, guys, 2026 is right around the corner. We got 44 days left of 2025. I just posted a video the other day, I'll put right over here, about building momentum to start 2026 on the right foot and make it your year so you can make exponentially fast progress. You can't save time, you can only spend it, so quit fucking wasting it. Right now is the time to start if you want to build momentum for 2026, so go get after it. As always, do not forget to do hard shit, be confident, have the courage to be uncomfortable, but most importantly, remember how much I love you guys and how much I'm rooting for you. That is everything I have for y'all today. Thank y'all for watching. I will see you guys in the next video.